She laughed so loudly everyone turned to look. "Oh, come on, Mark," she said, her voice dripping with playful cruelty. "You're adorable when you pretend to understand business talk." The room broke into uneasy chuckles, some sympathetic, others amused. I smiled, just enough to look civilized, but inside, something quiet and cold clicked into place. She thought she could humiliate me in front of her friends, but that night, she was about to learn that the man she dismissed stopped playing nice a long time ago. Hey, before I tell you how it all unfolded, make sure to hit subscribe, give this story a like, and tell me in the comments what you would have done if your spouse tried to embarrass you in front of everyone. Trust me, you're going to want to hear how this one ends. It was a Saturday evening. One of those cozy suburban gatherings where everyone tries too hard to look successful. My wife, Amanda, had spent all afternoon getting ready. New emerald green dress, perfect makeup, that perfume I bought her last Christmas and hadn't seen her wear since. She'd told me earlier that morning, "Try not to make tonight awkward, okay?" As if existing in the same room as her was a potential embarrassment. I didn't argue. I'd learned not to. For the past year, Amanda had been drifting further away, longer hours at work, fewer conversations that didn't start with, "Did you pay this bill?" or "Don't forget to take the trash out." The party was at her boss's house, a two-story glass and marble monument to money. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with low jazz, clinking glasses, and laughter that sounded rehearsed. Amanda thrived in that world. She floated from person to person like she was born to impress, flashing smiles, touching arms, laughing just a bit too long at other men's jokes. I stood by the bar, watching, playing the part of the supportive husband, invisible but present. At one point, she waved me over. "Everyone, this is my husband, Mark," she said, gesturing as if presenting a houseplant. "He's in logistics," or something like that. The group laughed, assuming it was harmless teasing. I smiled politely. Logistics or something like that. 8 months ago, I just closed a deal worth $500,000 for my company. But sure, something like that. She turned back to her group before I could say a word, launching into another story about her latest project. It was like I wasn't even there. I watched her laugh, tossing her hair, glowing under the attention. Every gesture screamed, "I'm in control." I should have felt angry, but all I felt was detached, like watching a movie I'd already seen too many times. That's when I heard a voice beside me. "You look like a man who's just seen too much of this show." I turned and saw a woman I didn't recognize, brunette, about Amanda's age, but dressed with effortless confidence. Black silk dress, silver jewelry, sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I'm Rachel," she said, holding out her hand. "I work with your wife." "Mark," I said, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, steady. "I know," she said with a small smile. "Amanda talks about you." I raised an eyebrow. "Does she?" Rachel's smile widened slightly. "Mostly about how focused you are on work. How you're always too tired for social things. Too serious. Too predictable." She said it like a challenge, not an insult. "Sounds about right," I said. "Guess I'm not much fun at parties." "Maybe not," she said, stepping a little closer. "But you look like a man who's worth paying attention to." Before I could respond, I saw Amanda glance our way from across the room. Her eyes narrowed slightly, her smile faltering for half a second before she turned back to her group. "Interesting." Rachel leaned against the bar, watching Amanda with the faintest trace of amusement. "You know," she said softly, "your wife has a reputation for pretending she's single at work events." I looked at her, curious. "And what's your point?" "My point," Rachel said, her voice dropping just enough to feel intimate, "is that sometimes people forget that ignoring someone who loves them doesn't make them stronger. It just leaves room for someone else to notice." Her words hung in the air, sharper than they should have been. I didn't move, didn't speak. Rachel smiled, a slow, deliberate smile. "Don't worry," she added. "I'm not here to cause trouble." "That's good," I said quietly. "Because she's watching us right now." Rachel turned slightly, enough to catch Amanda's gaze. Amanda quickly looked away, pretending to laugh at something someone said. Rachel chuckled. Oh, she noticed all right. For the next half hour, Rachel and I talked casually. About work, travel, nothing inappropriate, but with a spark that was impossible to ignore. Every so often, I caught Amanda's eyes on us, her polite facade cracking just a little more each time. The tables had turned without me even trying. Later, as the music softened and the crowd thinned, Rachel leaned in slightly and whispered, "You know, some women need to see what they've been taking for granted. Consider this a reminder." I looked at her, unsure what she meant, but before I could ask, Amanda appeared beside us, her smile brittle. "Rachel, I didn't know you two had met," she said, her tone sweet and sharp all at once. "We were just talking," Rachel said, smiling easily. "Your husband's very easy to talk to. You didn't tell me he was this charming." Amanda's smile twitched. "Is that so?" Rachel looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Oh, absolutely. He's the most interesting man here tonight." Amanda's fingers tightened around her glass. I could practically hear it creak that I didn't move. Didn't say a word. That's when I realized something important. I didn't have to fight for Amanda's attention anymore. Someone else already had it, and she didn't like how it felt one bit. And that's where the night began to shift in ways none of us expected. The moment Amanda walked away from the bar, I could feel the tension clinging to her like static. She was smiling at people again, laughing too loud, but her eyes kept darting back to where I stood with Rachel. It was the first time in months that I'd seen her unsettled, unsure of herself. And I'll admit, part of me enjoyed it. Rachel caught it too. "Interesting," she said quietly, swirling the ice in her glass. "She's jealous." I smirked. "Amanda doesn't do jealousy." "Oh, she does," Rachel said. "She just hides it under arrogance." I looked across the room again. Amanda was pretending to listen to her boss, but her gaze slid back toward us every few seconds. I could almost see the calculation behind her eyes, trying to decide whether to come over or to keep her pride intact. "You want to mess with her head a little?" Rachel asked suddenly, her tone casual but playful. "What do you have in mind?" I asked. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, subtle and expensive. "Dance with me." I raised an eyebrow. "There's no dance floor." "There's music," she said, gesturing to the soft jazz floating through the air. "Close enough." Before I could answer, she set her glass down, took my hand, and pulled me toward the open space near the windows. A few people turned to look. Amanda was one of them. Rachel placed her hands lightly on my shoulders, her voice just above a whisper. "Relax. You're overthinking." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and moved with her to the slow rhythm. It wasn't romantic, not really. It was calculated, controlled. A statement without a single word. And it worked. Amanda's smile was gone now. Her grip on her wine glass was white-knuckled. Every few seconds, she whispered something to the woman beside her, who nodded but kept sneaking nervous glances toward us. "She's furious," Rachel said softly, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. "You're enjoying this," I said. "Maybe a little," she replied. "But I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for you." Sometimes a mirror has to be held up before people see what they've become. I looked at her, studying her face. "And what about you?" "Me?" she smiled. "I just like making stories interesting." The song changed, slower now. Rachel's hand slid behind my neck, her eyes locked on mine. "You're allowed to be noticed, Mark," she whispered, "even if it makes her uncomfortable." I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because when I looked over her shoulder, I saw Amanda watching, her face pale, her eyes burning with something between anger and disbelief. She wasn't used to losing control. Rachel leaned closer, her breath warm against my ear. "She's coming." I turned slightly and saw Amanda setting her glass down with a forceful thud before marching toward us. Rachel smirked. "Right on cue." "This is going to get messy," I murmured. "Good," Rachel said. Maybe it's time it did. Amanda stopped just as the song ended. The dance is over, she said sharply, her voice louder than necessary. People nearby turned to look. Rachel slowly stepped back, but didn't break eye contact. You're right, she said calmly. Thank you for the dance, Mark. You're a wonderful partner. Then, without missing a beat, she added, among other things, I'm sure. Amanda's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Rachel picked up her drink from the bar and gave me a small nod before walking toward the patio doors, leaving the tension hanging between me and my wife like smoke. Amanda's jaw tightened. What was that? She hissed. A dance, I said evenly. Since when do you dance? Since tonight, apparently. She was flirting with you. Was she? I asked, raising my eyebrows. I hadn't noticed. It was a lie, of course, and she knew it. You're serious? She snapped. You're going to play dumb? I'm just enjoying the evening, I said quietly. Something I thought we were both supposed to do. She glared at me, her voice dropping lower. You're embarrassing me. I took a slow sip of my drink, feeling the ice clink against the glass. I think you've got that backwards. Excuse me, she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. Amanda, I said calmly, I came here to celebrate with you. You've ignored me since we walked in the door. I'm not sure how I'm the one embarrassing you. She blinked, caught off guard. For once, she didn't have a ready comeback. I want to go home, she said finally, but her voice lacked its usual authority. Then go, I said. I'll get a ride. You're not staying here with her, she said, her voice rising again. Who said anything about her? I asked. I'm staying because I'm enjoying not being invisible. That word, invisible, seemed to hit her harder than anything else. Fine, she said through clenched teeth. If you want to make a fool of yourself, be my guest. She turned and stormed off, her heels clicking hard against the marble floor. People tried not to stare, but couldn't help themselves. For the first time in a long time, Amanda wasn't the one commanding the room. I finished my drink, set the glass down, and took a deep breath. The air felt lighter, cleaner somehow. Rachel returned a few minutes later, carrying 2 fresh drinks. You handled that well, she said. Depends on your definition of well, I replied. She's probably halfway to her car right now. Maybe, Rachel said, handing me one of the glasses. But she's not leaving. Not yet. How can you be so sure? Because she's too proud. She'll stay just to prove she doesn't care. And when she realizes everyone saw what happened, she'll care a lot. I looked toward the hallway leading to the restrooms, and sure enough, Amanda was standing near the door, pretending to check her phone but watching us from the corner of her eye. You were right, I said. Rachel smiled. I usually am. We clinked glasses and stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then she said quietly, You're not the kind of man who enjoys games, are you? Not usually. Then stop letting her play them with you. Her tone wasn't flirtatious now. It was serious, almost protective. People treat you how you let them. Maybe it's time she learned that. I didn't respond, but I didn't have to. Because as I watched Amanda watching me, I realized Rachel was right. For years, I'd let Amanda define the rules. Tonight, for the first time, I wasn't following them anymore. Amanda didn't leave. I knew she wouldn't. Her pride was louder than her reason. She drifted back into the crowd after a few minutes, pretending to laugh and mingle, but her posture betrayed her. She was stiff, distracted, her smile more like a grimace she couldn't shake off. Rachel stood beside me at the bar, her expression calm, but there was something sharp in her eyes, like she was testing me, waiting to see what kind of man I'd be now that the script had flipped. So, she said, what happens next? I took a sip of my drink, the whiskey warm and steady in my chest. I guess that depends on how much longer she can pretend everything's fine. Rachel smiled faintly. Oh, she's unraveling already. You just can't see it yet. I did see it, though. Every time Amanda's gaze flicked toward us, every forced laugh that followed, every sip of wine a little too fast. She'd spent years perfecting her control, but tonight, it was slipping through her fingers. You don't have to do anything, Rachel said softly. Just stand still. Let her feel it. I didn't answer, but something in me agreed. For too long, I've been trying to hold things together, apologizing, compromising, smoothing out every rough edge. Tonight, I was done with that. Tonight, I was the rough edge. Half an hour later, the party had thinned out. The music was softer, conversations quieter, and the air smelled faintly of champagne and fading cologne. Amanda appeared again, walking toward me with a look that was equal parts anger and desperation. Rachel noticed her before I did. "Incoming," she whispered. "Try not to look too pleased." Amanda stopped in front of us, her voice deceptively calm. "Can I talk to you for a second?" she asked. Rachel lifted an eyebrow. "We were just talking about ambition," she said, smiling pleasantly. "It's fascinating what drives people, isn't it?" "I wasn't talking to you," Amanda said sharply. "No," Rachel replied, still smiling. "But you're standing in front of both of us." For a brief second, I thought Amanda might actually throw her drink. Instead, she took a breath and turned to me. "Mark, please. Just a minute." I nodded slightly, stepping aside with her toward a quieter corner of the room. "What are you doing?" she hissed the moment we were out of earshot. "Having a conversation," I said evenly. "You call that a conversation? She's flirting with you." "Maybe," I said. "Maybe not. Why do you care?" Amanda's eyes flashed. "Because she's doing it in front of everyone." "So," I said, "you've been doing the same thing for years, just with different people." She froze, her mouth opening and closing as if she couldn't decide what to say. "That's not fair," she said finally. "Fair?" I almost laughed. "Fair would have been you remembering to ask how my day was once in a while. Fair would have been you not acting like I'm an inconvenience every time we go out." "Don't twist this around," she snapped. "You're making a fool of yourself." "No," I said quietly. "I think for the first time, I'm making a point." She stared at me, the anger draining from her expression, replaced by something closer to fear. "I want to go home," she said again, but it sounded weaker this time. "I'm not ready to leave," I said. "You can go if you want." "Mark, please," she said, her voice shaking. "You're making it worse." I looked at her, and, for a moment, I almost felt sorry. Almost. "No," I said finally. "You already did that." When I turned back toward the bar, Rachel was there, waiting, her expression unreadable. "That went well," she said dryly. "Define well," I said. "She didn't throw anything at you," Rachel replied. "That's progress." She handed me another drink. "Here, you look like you could use it." I took it, more for something to do than anything else. The weight of the glass was grounding. "You think I'm a bad person?" I asked suddenly. "No," Rachel said without hesitation. "I think you've been too good for too long." "That's not the same thing." I glanced toward Amanda again. She was standing near the door now, pretending to talk to one of her coworkers, but her eyes kept darting toward us. Rachel followed my gaze and smirked. "You know, she's probably telling them you're having a midlife crisis." "Maybe I am," I said. "Or maybe I'm just done being invisible." Rachel's smile softened. "Then don't disappear again." Not for her, not for anyone. The night stretched on, the tension hanging between us like a live wire. At some point, Amanda disappeared completely, probably outside, trying to regain control of the story. Rachel and I stood by the bar, talking quietly, the world around us fading into background noise. She asked about my work, my goals, my life before Amanda. It had been years since anyone had asked those questions with genuine interest. For a moment, I almost forgot where I was. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Amanda returning. Her expression was calmer now, rehearsed. She'd rebuilt the mask. She approached with deliberate composure, the kind that warned me the next move would be public. "Are you done?" she asked. "Done with what?" I replied. "With this little performance." "You mean existing?" I said. "No, that might take a while." Rachel tried to suppress a laugh, but failed. Amanda's eyes snapped to her. "You think this is funny?" "A little," Rachel said. "Mostly sad." "You don't know anything about us," Amanda said, her voice trembling. "I know more than you think," Rachel said quietly. I know you've been telling people he's boring, predictable, too focused on work. I know you've been using his stability as an excuse for your own emptiness. And I know you didn't expect him to remind you what it feels like when someone else notices him. Amanda's face went white. You're lying. Am I? Rachel asked. Because if I am, maybe you should ask yourself why it sounds true. The silence that followed was thick. People nearby pretended not to listen, but their eyes were on us. Amanda's lip trembled. This is between me and my husband, she said finally. Then maybe start acting like he's your husband, Rachel said, her tone calm but merciless. Not your background prop. Amanda turned to me, her eyes glistening. Mark, let's go. Please. I looked at her for a long moment, then at Rachel, who gave me a small nod like she already knew what I'd decide. You go ahead, I said quietly. I'll stay a bit longer. Amanda blinked. You can't be serious. Completely, I said. For once, I think I'll stay until the end. She stared at me, trying to process the words, trying to find the man she could still manipulate, but he wasn't there anymore. Without another word, she turned and walked toward the exit, her heels echoing across the marble floor. People watched as she left, their conversations hushed. I didn't follow her. Rachel handed me another drink, her eyes steady. You sure about that? She asked. I've never been more sure, I said. And for the first time in years, I meant it. I stayed after she left. Not because I was trying to make a point anymore, but because for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like disappearing. The crowd thinned, laughter softened, and the room settled into that quiet rhythm of people wrapping up goodbyes. Rachel stood beside me, calm and composed, sipping her drink like she had nowhere else to be. You know she's going to call, she said finally. Probably before you even get home. I nodded. She always does when she loses control. Then don't answer, Rachel said. Let her sit with it. Her tone wasn't vengeful. It was matter of fact, almost gentle. People only change when silence starts speaking louder than excuses. I looked at her, wondering how someone I'd met just a few hours earlier could read me so easily. You talk like you've lived this before, I said. She smiled faintly. I was married once. To someone who thought affection was optional. That was all she said, but it was enough. We talked for a while longer, nothing heavy, just easy conversation that felt strangely grounding. When I finally decided to leave, she walked me to the door. You sure you're okay? She asked. I'm sure, I said. I just don't know what comes next. Then don't rush it, she said. Let her wonder who you are without her. The drive home was quiet, the kind of silence that stretches out and forces you to think. My phone buzzed twice, then again. Amanda. I didn't pick up. By the time I parked in the driveway, I could see the light in the living room glowing through the curtains. She was waiting. Part of me wanted to turn around and keep driving, just to see what it felt like to leave without a plan. But I didn't. Not yet. When I walked in, Amanda was sitting on the couch, still in her dress, her eyes red from crying. Where were you? She asked softly. At the party, I said. You left early, remember? You stayed with her? I stayed because I wanted to. The words hung in the air, heavy and deliberate. She swallowed hard. I was worried. You were angry, I corrected. There's a difference. She looked away, twisting her ring nervously. Can we talk about this? That depends, I said. Do you want to talk? Or do you just want me to forgive you for how tonight went? She flinched, but I didn't stop. Because if you're just here to patch it up and pretend again, I'm not interested. Mark, please, she said, her voice cracking. I know I hurt you. I know I've been distant. But you can't just throw away everything. I sat down across from her, calm, detached. You threw it away a long time ago, I said. You just didn't notice until someone else did. Her eyes filled with tears. Did you sleep with her? She whispered. No, I said, but that's not the point. The point is, you didn't care about me until someone else reminded you I exist. That's not true, isn't it? I asked quietly. Because for months, I've been a paycheck and a background character in your story. The only reason you're crying now is because for one night, the story didn't revolve around you. She looked like she wanted to argue, but no words came. Instead, she sat there in silence, the kind that makes even the air feel heavy. I stood up. I'm going upstairs, I said. You can stay down here if you want. I think we both need the space. I left her sitting there, staring into nothing, the sound of her quiet sobs following me halfway up the stairs. When I woke up the next morning, the smell of breakfast filled the air. Bacon, eggs, coffee, the works. I walked into the kitchen and found her in the blue dress I'd bought her years ago, the one she'd always claimed was too fancy for mornings. Good morning, she said with a shaky smile. I made your favorite. Thanks, I said, pouring coffee. What's the occasion? No occasion. I just wanted to do something nice. I nodded slowly, taking a sip. You don't have to fix everything with breakfast. I'm not trying to fix everything, she said quickly. I want us to start again. I looked at her. She meant it, or at least she wanted to believe she did. You think one nice morning erases last night? I asked. No, she said, her voice trembling. But I'm trying. I set my cup down. You've said that before. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message. Rachel, hope you survived the night. I didn't reply, but Amanda saw her name on the screen. Are you going to answer that? She asked, her voice tightening. Maybe later. Delete her number, she said, the command sharp beneath the pleading tone. No, I said simply. Why not? Because you don't get to control who talks to me anymore. She's trying to come between us. You did that yourself, I said quietly. She just happened to show me what it looks like when someone listens. Amanda's composure cracked again. I can change, she said, tears streaming now. I'll do better. Stop, I interrupted. Don't promise things just because you're scared. I've heard them all before. She reached across the table, her hand trembling. I love you, Mark. I looked at her hand, but didn't take it. Love isn't enough if it comes with conditions. I stood, walking to the window. The morning light spilled across the room. Too bright, too real. You once told me I was too predictable, I said. That you wished I'd surprise you. She nodded slowly, wiping her face. Then let me surprise you now. I walked upstairs, grabbed a small bag, and started packing. She followed, panic setting in. What are you doing? Taking a few days, I said. To think, to breathe, to remember who I am when I'm not trying to please someone who doesn't see me. You can't just leave, she said, her voice breaking. You told me last night not to come back if I walked out, I said. So maybe I'm just taking your advice. I didn't mean it. You did, I said, zipping the bag. You just didn't think I'd listen. I stopped at the doorway and looked back at her. She was standing there, tears streaking her makeup, her dress wrinkled from sleep, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Here's the truth, I said quietly. The man who used to beg for your attention doesn't exist anymore. The man who stayed silent to keep the peace is gone. What's left is someone who finally understands his worth. And whether you like it or not, that's not a man who settles for being ignored. She opened her mouth to speak, but I didn't let her. The next move is yours, Amanda. Just make sure you think before you make it. I walked out without looking back. The air outside felt different, cool, clean, alive. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped. I felt free. My phone buzzed again as I reached my car. Another message from Rachel. Coffee later? I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the screen for a long moment, then slipped the phone into my pocket. I wasn't sure what came next, and for once, that didn't scare me. Maybe I'd go for coffee. Maybe I'd just drive for a while and think. But one thing was certain. I'd never go back to being invisible again. And if you've been following this story to the end, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and hit like if you've ever had to remind someone you're worth noticing. Because sometimes, silence says everything they refuse to hear.